Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again. I'm your host, Doc Rodden, and this is Gruesome Magazine, where we review the very latest in streaming and video on-demand horror movies. Each week, my co-hosts Jeff Mohr, Crystal Cleveland, Christopher G. Mohr, and myself will take a look at various spooky, scary, and gory genre offerings. Tonight, we're reviewing the documentary King on Screen. All right, let me introduce my crew, starting off with my co-host, Jeff Mohr. Jeff, how you doing, sir?
I'm wretched.
Whoa,
my God.
Waka. All right,
Wow.
also joining us this week is Crystal Cleveland, the Living Dead Girl. How you doing?
I'm wonderful.
Wunderbar.
Wunderbar, darling.
Yes, awesome. And of course, we can't do this without award-winning screenwriter, filmmaker, and all-around crazy dude,
Director.
Christopher G. Mohr. I know. I don't know where screenwriter popped in my head from, but it's not untrue.
Technically, that's true, yeah. So,
Go Writers Guild. Here's Christopher. I'm here.
I thought sure you were going to say creepy. Award-winning creep is what I thought was coming.
Wow, award-winning.
Maybe I should win an award for that. I've had some people tell me that lately.
oh, you're not a creep.
All right. Wow. We're going there, huh? Okay.
Nope.
All right. We are here tonight to review King on Screen. What we're going to do is give you our first impressions. They're going to be spoiler-free, but really, it's a documentary. And then we'll talk about the movie, and then we'll wrap things up, giving our score 1 to 5. And
It's weird. And our favorite scene.
Our
This
favorite
is weird.
nuggets.
It's weird for
Nuggets.
documentaries, honestly, because it's
Yes.
like, you know.
But there's a nugget. There's a nugget somewhere in this documentary that surprised you, and that's what we're looking for. All right. We hope you enjoy this review. And if you do, please check us out and hit the like, subscribe, share with a friend. Buttons are all free and easy to do, and every click helps us find more horror fans just like you. All right, let's get into it. King on Screen, in theaters on August 11th, 2023, and on demand and Blu-ray September 8th, 2023. The synopsis is 1976. Brian De Palma directs Carrie, the first novel by Stephen King. Since then, more than 50 directors adapted the Master of Horror's books and stories in more than 80 films and series, making him now the most adapted author still alive in the world. I like the still alive part. We want to keep it that way for a good long while. Written and directed by Daphne Bowie. And the cast, which is really just directors talking about stuff, includes Mike Flanagan, James Caan, Frank Darabont, Amy Irving, Andre Ordebar, Jeffrey Dumont, Taylor Hackford, Tom Holland, and Mikael Hillstrom, Vincenzo Natali, Todd Williams, Louis Teague, Mark L. Lester, Mick Garris, Josh Boone, and Tom McLaughlin, among others. I'm pretty sure there were other people involved. All right, let's find out what our first impressions are, and I'm going to surprise Jeff by making him go first.
You know what? I enjoyed this, but I guess it fits the title, King on Screen. Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
I enjoyed the heck of out of the stories that people told about, especially Frank Darabont. I thought he had a lot of good inside information on the movies that he made, but also on other movies, and why, for instance, why he didn't, his personal opinion on The Shining, which sort of clued me in on some things I am ashamed to say I'd never noticed. So I don't know what else to say other than I love that inside information. And I didn't know because, when I was working, I didn't go out and buy every streaming service there was. So I'm watching this one interview where he's on, I think he's on the Colbert Show, and he's listing all these things that were Stephen things that were coming out. And I was like, holy crap, I can't believe I missed all this stuff. So now, I'm like writing series down and looking up where they're streaming, and now I'm subscribed to that one or this one, and now I can go watch those. I'm fired up. I learned stuff.
Fired up. I like that.
And the stuff about his accident too, and how hard that was, but at the same time, from the outside looking in, it was like he never missed a beat. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Christopher G. Mohr. What was your first impression?
Well, I'm always a sucker for any documentaries on movies in general. So I loved all the information about it. I mean, as someone that read up, I grew up reading a lot of Stephen King novels in general. In fact, I'm still mad that I had a previous girlfriend who her mom wanted to borrow some of my Stephen King books, and I never got it back.
Oh no.
So I need to replace some of those. And if anything, watching this made me not only want to go back, and I haven't read any Stephen King novels in a while. It made me want to go back and read the novels. But at the same time, I'd love to sort of just do a journey through a lot of the Stephen King properties, especially the ones that I haven't seen. But yeah, I love. I was kind of wondering how how this is going to go, because I think even though I love watching a lot of movie documentaries, sometimes they could be badly formed, and I was kind of worried. I mean, we have basically Easter egg, the movie, the very beginning, the book ending, the documentary part, that sometimes, like, wow, some of the acting's really bad, even though it's got like cameos out the wazoo and has references to every Stephen King book or movie ever made, which I thought was kind of an interesting way. But I think at the same time, I was like, I'm not sure. The way it was formed, it was kind of like,
it was horrible.
It was not as good. But I can see what they're going through or going for. But I think once we got to the meat of it and the documentary stuff, and how we went to different, not only all the different types of movies that have been made on the properties, but just all Stephen King stuff about the different parts of his life and how that informed it. Even how his wife helped inform some of his stuff. Or even there's stuff I hadn't even thought about, how the themes across a lot of Stephen King stuff, like how a lot of it's just based, not usually big city stuff as much. It's mostly about like small stories, like in towns and stuff that everybody can kind of relate to. And he's always usually about like, not always about like these people that most people can't sort of connect to, every person, I guess. And how so many people are influenced by things. So it goes in so many, even though it goes in a lot of different directions, it's all still connected, and then also has those elements that you normally would see probably if they're the making of for certain of movies, but it gave more information there. I mean, there's even, interesting thing about like 1408 that most people didn't know until you watch this documentary. So yeah, so I think so I think it has a lot of really interesting. I was enthralled when it came to just all this telling stories. I do feel like I kind of wish they'd gotten to Palma to be part of this as well. If you can include all the different movies that have been made, it would have been nice to hear from him a little bit. But I think also it could have been one of these things where they just focus on the bigger directors, but they focus on all these different people who are affiliated in small parts or big, and he even got into some of the later stuff with Dr. Sleep and some of the more stuff and how that connection to the Kubrick stuff. So yeah, so I really loved all the different elements of this. And I think it was, I love behind the scenes stuff in general. So where it wasn't just specifically about Stephen King's part of it. It's also about the formation of translation of stuff and working with actors and learning all the behind the scenes stuff as well. Cause that's why I've been buying movies on physical media, cause I can watch all the special feature stuff. So yeah, I loved all the different information parts of this and the stories told. So yeah, I just ate this stuff up like catnip. So yes, it's I think it's a really wonderful documentary. I think the only misstep I'd say would probably be just the wonky way the Easter egg intro,
the bookended
intros sort of work or don't work.
All right, Crystal Cleveland, what was your first impression?
Well, when I first started watching this, I was so blown away and disappointed by how horrible the intro is. It's really bad, and I'm not sure if it's the screener or what, but the sound is really, really bad. I'm worried about it. That's how bad it is to me. I'm worried that people will be turned off by this and not watch the actual documentary portion of this, because the documentary portion of this is fabulous. I really enjoyed it. Once it got into the interviews and all of this, I loved it. I loved the stories. I loved the background footage. I loved how they separated it and how they went through different movies. I was like totally in. But this beginning part, oh my God, I was really disappointed. I was like, well, it is cool as far as all the Easter eggs. Like literally every bit of it is one reference or another, but the sound, guys, like when they did the stand portion of it, like, and it was so hot and screaming, and yet I know they tried to bring the gain down to like it I don't know. I don't know what they need to do to fix it, but if they can fix it, they really should, because that would up the game of this a lot. Even though the acting is bad in it too, that's fine. I can handle the bad acting, but I can't handle bad sound like that. It's interesting to me that the shop, the creep shop, had estimated 1974, which is when King wrote the book, but not when it went to screen. And considering we're talking about King on screen, I feel like that's interesting that they didn't put 76. Sorry, just an estimate, just a thing that I noticed.
It's fair. It's fair.
Yeah. But since we're specifically talking about King on screen and not the books, like I said, once it got into the interviews, loved it. Really enjoyed all of the stories, and I actually learned quite a bit. I don't know what my favorite was, because I do feel like there was a lot of interesting stuff regarding, I mean, you hear rumors and stuff about The Shining and about this and about that, but it was interesting to kind of, I feel like they were very smart with the way that they showed it. They kind of touched on some stuff with Kubrick, but they didn't go too far, and they just gave you little nuggets here and there. Loved this part of the documentary. If it had just been all the interviews, I don't know that I would have a negative thing to say about it. Is that crazy?
No,
like
not at
even
all.
when it
Not at
even
all.
when
That
it
makes
came
perfect
back,
sense.
yeah, even when it came back to the wraparound, I was like, oh, here she is again. Oh God, I wouldn't go outside if I were you. I wouldn't go. I'm like, oh God, nah, don't do it. But yeah, so that's my nitpick. That's my thing, and it's actually kind of long. So
Yeah.
to those of you that are going to watch this, just get past that. If you don't like it, then just wait for it, and I think you'll enjoy it after that. To those of you who do like it, well, great. That's wonderful. I'm very happy for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. The wraparound, I pretty much tuned out and was just kind of looking. I wasn't really paying attention to what they were saying because it didn't feel like it had anything to do with anything. But I was looking for the cameos and all the little knickknacks that are in the shop, or the signs and stuff. And so I was just kind of ignoring that. But then when it gets into the actual interviews with all the set pieces with the directors talking about, mostly directors talking about adapting to the stuff, and I like that they got into what it means to adapt a novel into a screenplay, because they talked about that often, about the differences between the mediums, and you can't really do it straight up. If you do it straight up, it kind of flops, and if you do it too far away from it, then people complain. Yes. Shining, even though The Shining is a brilliant film, it's not necessarily, as I say in the documentary, a great Stephen King adaptation. I really enjoyed it. I would say because I ignored the beginning and the ending of it. My only nitpick would be that it felt slightly haphazard. I wasn't really sure what direction they were going, and what there was no through point other than just the very top level of it. So I'm not really sure what story there was behind this, and even though it's a documentary, I kind of feel like there should be a message, a story. And I mean, it's all superficial in that respect. Now, getting into the meat of what they had to say, it's incredibly fascinating, makes up for a lot of that. It talks about encounters and, one director being on another director's set, and Stephen King showing up and having the birthday party, or having Kubert call him at 4 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning and ask him about God. There's all these crazy things that happen, and it is really fascinating and gripping, especially if you're a fan of Stephen King and the films. They kind of concentrated more on the more recent stuff. So, I mean, Carrie got a gloss over. I don't think, I'm not sure that Salem's Lot got much talk at all.
No, it didn't.
And some of the, there's some mid 80s films that may, probably thankfully they didn't actually get into, but, they touched on some of them. But at the same time, hearing the reverence that they all had for King, and how well King interacts with Hollywood, if you will, the directors and those with visions that are connected to his work. He's famous for that, right? The dollar babies, right, and all that. So,
Yeah.
To me, it's fascinating. It it's perfect. The only thing is that I kind of wanted a little more of a punch at the end. I wanted to have this thing, and it isn't. It's just It's just,
But what kind of punch were you looking for?
well, I don't know. That's what I was looking. Like what's
like you
what can
can't
we get out
make
of it?
something out of nothing. Like,
well, if there's
so
nothing
is there
there,
a punch?
then what are we doing? We're just basically recalling history. We're not.
Well,
really
I'll tell you right now,
debating anything.
compared to other documentaries, I usually have problems when it just feels like they just throw different things. But to me, it flowed so well,
I feel like it.
throughout.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And I felt it ended the right way. I don't
Mhm.
feel like it just like ended for no reason. I think it sort of ended in a way that's like how basically all these different properties, have been made. All these people trying to do adaptation and stuff. I think for me, though, again, the only thing missing is just some of the people like, where's Mary Lambert who directed Pet Sematary? Why didn't they interview her? Why didn't they interview Brian De Palma? I think some of the other people, and maybe there was just issues, or sometimes people don't want to talk. I don't know.
Timing.
Yeah, because it's weird that they got all those big cameos by like Mimi Rogers and all these different people in the crappy part of it. But when it comes to people talking, I would have loved to see some of those people. But I think also we got to see faces of other people you probably don't talk to that made other things, like how many people call back to when they loved 1408 or other these films, films that don't be talked about much. So it's kind of cool. Also, I think sometimes they gloss over the lesser things. Luckily we didn't talk about Langoliers or some of these other crappy versions of some of the Stephen King stuff. But I don't know. Yeah. I feel like it, regardless of if you feel like it doesn't have like it's really hard to create a story and documentaries to begin with. So I think the main thing is just finding those areas when you get all this footage and you get all these interviews, finding all these different things that kind of connect, and you find those little bubbles and you create those bubbles with telling the story. And I thought they found a better way to do this than a lot of these documentaries do, because I think we've watched even some of the other things we've seen, like the Child's Play one, they're kind of all over the place to begin with. But this one I felt more natural, because I think they found those connections between all the different properties, that worked for me. Because there's a lot. Again, I to be honest, this film inspired me. I wrote down, what was it? There's one quote that Frank Darabont says: "If you're remembered for anything, it's for the kindness you show or the art you create. You're not remembered for your bank account."
Yeah.
When he talked about like they were going to give him a bunch of money when he wrote Shawshank Redemption, that which I never heard this story, where what's his name?
Rob Reiner. Yeah.
Rob Reiner was going to direct it, and Tom Cruise was going to be in it. and I was like, I can't imagine that film with that. I mean, I like Rob Reiner, but I'm not sure he could have pulled that off of the way that film was pulled off. And he was like, and all the money in the world. He felt like that. He felt so connected to it, And that quote, I'm putting that. I'll probably put that on my Instagram today, because I just like I love that quote, and I think a lot of the stories about someone that worked translated a short story for Worst Laid Plans, that adaptation of that, and how you had to take something that's precious to this writer and try to spin it and make it like they talk about, moving pictures, you're making stuff that you have to create this visual representation of that. And I think also how they also connected to some of the stuff to like the horror genre. They talk about Psycho and other things in it as well. So they
Night of the Living Dead,
yeah, they talk about Living Dead and some of the how they connected that, and also how he's So I don't know. I really love the love behind when it came to filmmaking and working with actors and working on sets and doing all these different things. There's a wonderful thing where Stephen King came on the set, Green Mile and stuff, and there's all these different things. I'm just like, oh man, I was in heaven watching parts of this stuff because I this is my crack. I could watch making of stuff until the end of time, probably more so something than films, because I'm so, I grew up watching that stuff and like loving it, knowing how the fudge is made when it comes to filmmaking. And so,
personally for me, whenever Frank Darabont was on, the film was much better for it. Not that it was bad in the first place. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that there was something really elevated when the bad word, but when he was on, it felt more urgent and more important. And just the way maybe he was expressing himself and sharing the stories, it just felt that way. I mean, everybody else did the same thing.
Greg and Nicotera too. But yeah.
I mean,
but not as much as that. Darabont was
Mick Harris and stuff like that, and there's plenty of others that certainly, you could feel the love for the genre. But I don't know, Frank Darabont was above all the others. I was really impressed with him and how he, like you said, with the quote. So, Jeff, your thoughts, sir?
I am agreeing with everything you said. I did like Frank Darabont's stuff the best, I think. It was the most informative and the most inside in general. Except for, I was alert when whenever King was talking, but that isn't very often.
No.
He showed films of somebody else.
I did enjoy seeing all the cameos that he did in films and stuff. That was fun to watch again. They're all silly.
I'm wondering if the reason they created that front end is because I'm sure that they didn't intentionally leave anybody out of this. I just don't think that I think that it had to be like someone didn't want to be interviewed, or they didn't have the time, or never was able to be. And maybe that's why they had to create this beginning part.
Well, I mean, fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I mean,
I guess they definitely wanted to keep it more on the creators and the writers and filmmakers and stuff, because I guess they could have easily asked like Mimi Rogers or those different people. But yeah, I mean, I will say, as much as we're slamming on the bookending stuff, they definitely there was a lot of production design. Because I mean, like literally, you could sit there and do 1,001 Stephen King references.
You like the little knot in the shoe.
Everything, even the kid from Pet Sematary is the guy behind the counter, but he's got an eye patch like in Silver Bullet, and it's like, there's what was it, Needful Things, and Creep Show, and I mean, there's
everything.
Mist. I mean, every book, every adaptation is in every shot of that, the Cujo painting, it's like,
and actually the dog was called Cujo. Did you hear someone Cujo?
Yeah, it was, so it's like, because even as much as I was like, oh man, the filmmaking is bad in this, I was like, because Nick Garris is walking, like, I was like paying attention, like there's one part where you see the outside of the sign, there's like every sign is a reference to something, but it's cool, but it kind of pulls you out. And it's like, and then at the same time, I was like, man, some of these people are older than their movie counterparts. So I'm like, I'm not sure who this actor is or this actor is. Oh, I know who that is. But they had the really bad Running Man commercial. But
oh my god!
But the actress in it was, I can't remember what she was from, but she's one of those. But as much as I hate feeling crapping on that, it still had so many different things. I could see what they're going for, but it was
Yeah.
went so long. And at first I thought I had to look it up on IMDb. I was like, is this a documentary or is this the?
I did too. I was like, wait a second. I thought,
Well, maybe this is a movie.
are they actually making a movie where they make a movie about like little references?
I thought it was like, is this Night
totally...
of the Museum with Stephen King stuff?
Mm.
And I didn't know.
That'd be funny. That'd be funny.
I was like, literally, because it
this is
goes
gonna
so
be-
long. I was like, why this is because the main
There's a little fan servicey, but
well, yeah, it's very
appropriate for this.
But I understand what they're going for, but it's a little too long at the very beginning.
And I agree, it did make me want to like, go back to the novels. I stopped reading them at some point in my life, but I remember The Stand. I read so much that it fell apart. The paperback just fell. The spine just couldn't take it. And I read that thing. I mean, that's a huge novel,
Yes.
and I love that novel. That's my favorite work of his. But it's not my favorite movie. It was my favorite work. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Let's give our score 1 to 5 on this documentary. And what did we learn? What's our favorite nugget? Nugget.
That's
Just
tough.
First. There's tons of nuggets.
Yeah, the beginning and was weird, but I don't know. I don't even remember it. It wasn't something that stuck in my mind as bothering me. So
I agree with that.
I guess it wasn't that negative of a thing, other than it would have been nice to kind of know where we were going there. But favorite. What am I going to give this? You know what? I'm going to go 4.5.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
I started writing down the stories that I enjoyed, and they just kept going and going. I think one of the ones I really liked was the story about Bruce Willis recommending
Oh,
Michael
wow.
Clark
Yeah,
Duncan
good job. Good job.
for The Green Mile. And that's a movie I have not. I remember working at the bookstore when that came out. And talk about coveting when those little thin volumes came out once a month for 6 months.
I bought those every time they came out. I was doing
Yeah. I was there unpacking them, baby, waiting. And then it came out in an omnibus where they were all together, etc. So it was an interesting idea. He likes to explore things, and that was an interesting exploration. But anyway, yeah, and the stories about Tom Hanks on the set and stuff, and how
okay.
Well,
Wait,
just
you
what
can't
you were.
take
We were just.
everything.
You can't take everything. No.
Yeah, like
Oh, I'm taking everything.
I'm like, okay, because I was like, that's what I was like, okay,
I'll
wait,
stop.
no.
I didn't mention Tom Hanks at all. So
I was like, no. I was
that
like,
was on my
good.
list too.
That's why I'm like, no.
All right, Christopher G. Mohr, you're up next.
Christopher, you know what not to say, don't you?
Gordon, if you give me $5. I you know what? Despite my issues with the bookending part, I'll just take a 0.25 off of it. 2.5. So I'll go to 4.75. I really
nice.
I enjoyed the stories told. This is right in my alley, and I think thinking about it, Doc, I think it does have sort of a structure to it. I think we start off with people talking about how it influenced them as kids and how it kind of scared them things, and then it went on to like its influence through pop culture by the end. So there is sort of like there's kind of a 3-point to it, even though it goes all these different areas. But I think the main thing is all the different connections it makes. Because if anything, this really broadened my mind as to how all the themes that Stephen King does in his stories, that there is a connection through all of them, even though they're different stories about different types of things. I never really realized that from like the strong female characters are sort of like a part of his dealing with his wife and or just the small towns and the women in his life. So all, or just addiction, how that affected him, which if you know Mike Flanagan, he had a similar issue with addiction, so that's why his kind of connection there. So yeah, there is a little bit of structure to it, even though it's not your normal structure like a normal film. But documentaries can play around with that a little bit. So as for favorite nugget, chicken nugget.
Nug.
Chicky nug. I will say I'm going to pick the thing that I kind of mentioned earlier without saying it. I'll say that the axe they used in 1408
Yes.
was the axe used in The Shining. So
that's cool.
Awesome.
So I thought that was and the guy said that like this has always been a secret, never really told that. He might be saying that it probably made on the freaking DVD or something. but I think just I always find that cool when you do little Easter eggs in your films from other things. And I think with it supposedly being the real axe from The Shining, I thought that was a really kind of nice connection to that. Even though we watch a clip, you can barely see the axe. So, but yeah, I think that's probably my favorite nugget. Other than that, the quote that I mentioned earlier that I now is going to be my new mantra. So
that's good. Yep. Crystal, what's your score and favorite nugget?
Okay, I'm giving it a 4, and my favorite nugget is definitely the Tom Hanks on set. Like, I loved how he catered to Michael. That just made me fall in love with Tom Hanks. I mean, I've always loved Tom Hanks, of course, but it made me fall in love with Tom Hanks even more. That's such a wonderful. I mean, of course, what actors don't realize is the more Tom helps him, the better he looks too. Like they're a team. When you're acting with someone, you should help them, because guess what? If you both play off of each other, you're going to get a way better performance. And Tom Hanks knows that. He's brilliant. But that movie, that's one of those movies I watched and I don't regret watching it, much like The Shawshank Redemption. They're two beautiful movies. I'm very happy that I watched not my typical stuff, but yeah,
great performances.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, I'm a little more critical because I still feel even with all the stuff Christopher mentioned that adds to the haphazardness of it, but I still enjoyed it. My score is 3.75. Crystal, that's the one I wrote down as well. I thought that was the best thing ever. But I will say I'm torn between two. And both of them involve Frank Darabont. So I'm going to go with just his passion for making oh my God, what's the first one? Not the Green Mile, but Shawshank Redemption. Just his passion for it. You know, that he was basically, and it kind of leads into what Christopher was saying. You know, he was, they were basically saying, hey, we like this, but we want to buy it from you, and and money wasn't an object, right? So it's kind of you have to appreciate that, and I really like that. Now the other thing was about The Mist and the ending.
Oh yeah.
And that's Stephen King. And since I'm going last, I'll take it. But StephenKing said he wished he had written that. I will say that
I love Stephen King because of that too. Yeah. What writer would say that? Like,
right.
Well, the story about interrupting you again, but the story about somebody mentioned it, the two Shinings, the Shining, the Kubrick Shining, melding with Dr. Sleep, and Flanagan talking to King about it. He says, "I don't like it, but let's talk." You know, he was willing to listen.
Yeah, and they didn't share it here, but it was elsewhere that the Kubrick family and King had to come to terms on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that the Mist got me so bad at the end. I can't watch that movie again. I can't watch it again.
But let me tell you, like,
powerful,
it is, and it makes sense, and you will never forget the movie because of that. Like, my neighbor asked me, because they know I'm the horror movie lover. They're like, so what about this movie? What about that movie? What about? And then they asked me about The Mist, and I was like, The Mist is one of the most amazing movies ever. Horrible ending. Horrible ending.
It will crush you.
But it's worth it. But it's worth it. I mean, at least once. I mean, I don't. Yeah.
And out of all of his stuff, that one is one that I love that story, and that movie did not disappoint me.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of them, you just can't, you can't put all the stuff that King puts into a story into a movie. So when they do it right, it's amazing.
Yeah. Another thing I liked was just the idea of what movie that they should be watching for the Green Mile. and he said, "I can't watch this movie. He's got to watch this movie." And I just love that. It's a great example of the adaptation, right? Making the choices. And if you're a hardcore, you're going to say that's not what he was watching. But if but it is the right decision. So Kubert took it a little too far. To be fair. But Kubert made a great Kubert movie, not a great.
I love The Shining.
Well, like they said, yeah.
It's like I love The Shining, but
the thing I didn't get before, the idea that, and I've read the book. The first Stephen King book I read was The Shining, and I bought it off one of those old convenience store paperback racks.
Oh, nice.
It doesn't. There's no art for Jack Torrance. He's crazy as a loon from beginning to end. I mean, that look on his face when they're driving is
crazy
just like,
as
what?
a loon.
Yeah.
You mean in the movie, not in the book?
In the movie, yeah.
In the movie. In the book, there's an arc where he's trying to get better, and he has a good nature to start with, but then, anyway.
Yep. Didn't quite come across.
which was kind of about King struggling with his addictions as well, apparently. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. That's our review of King on Screen. Check it out and let us know what you think about this and other documentaries down below. We'd love to hear from you. Christopher, Jeff, Crystal, thank you for joining me. This was, as always,
you're welcome.
Fun.
Glad you rounded that one up.
Well, loved it. Thanks.
All right. Let's say goodnight.
Good night.
Good evening.
Bye.
Gruesome Magazine.